The Velari Concord had always prided itself on its peaceful nature, having never faced true danger in their long history. But that calm was shattered the moment their distress beacon was sent. Their outer colonies, established on the edge of their star systems, had come under attack by an enemy they could neither understand nor fight back against the Nullex swarm. These synthetic horrors, made from the remnants of long-dead civilizations, were ruthless in their need to consume and destroy anything organic in their path. The Velari had called for help, expecting the usual allies to come to their aid. Instead, their SOS signal reached somewhere unexpected, far beyond the usual diplomatic channels. It was a cold, distant place, far removed from their carefully constructed alliances. The signal cut through the stars and reached Earth, a world that had long been classified by most galactic species as a death world. A place that had somehow, against all odds, survived in the harshest of conditions, a world where nature itself was a constant threat. The Velari had forgotten about Earth, their records barely mentioning it, an isolated, violent planet, where survival was a struggle. What the Velari didn't know was that Earth had something that none of the other peaceful species in the galaxy had: humans. And humans were not like any species the Velari had ever known. No sooner had the signal been sent than the response came: a fleet of human warships, led by battle-hardened commanders who had seen conflict in every possible form. They were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to fight. The Velari watched in growing disbelief as the human fleet jumped into their system, emerging from faster-than-light travel with a power that seemed far too aggressive for a species they thought of as primitive. The human ships, scarred from countless battles, immediately engaged their cloaking systems, positioning themselves around the Velari's homeworld with cold precision. The Velari, confused and alarmed, prepared for the worst. Was this a trick? Were the humans coming to invade? But instead, the humans sent a single message. It wasn't a threat, but a promise. Hold the line. Reinforcements have arrived. The words echoed in the quiet of the Velari command center, but the message wasn't meant to reassure. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end the war. As the Nullex swarm's dreadforms continued their relentless assault on the planet, the Velari had no choice but to watch helplessly as the human warships began launching drop pods directly into the path of the attacking Nullex. These were no ordinary combat drops. The humans moved with the deadly efficiency of a species that had fought for every breath of survival. Each pod struck with the force of a bomb, tearing apart Nullex forces on impact. The Velari couldn't believe their eyes. They had never seen a species so determined, so willing to sacrifice, to fight without hesitation. It wasn't just battle tactics, they were survivors. The humans had learned how to live in the harshest conditions the galaxy could offer, and that made them not just soldiers, but agents of destruction against anything that threatened life. The Velari had believed they understood the galaxy. They had made peace with dozens of species. They had developed technologies to create harmony, to build understanding. But what they hadn't accounted for was the sheer ferocity of humanity. The Velari were not accustomed to seeing such aggression from those they had deemed beneath them. But now, as they watched the humans tear through the swarm's forces, they understood something they had never considered. In the galaxy's hierarchy, humanity was not a weak link, but a terrifyingly strong one. However, the victory came at a price. With each strike, the Nullex seemed to adapt, becoming more cunning, more coordinated. The humans were relentless, but so was their enemy. The Velari were left wondering if these strange Deathworlders, so unpredictable in their ways, might just be the only force in the galaxy capable of ending the swarm. But there was a deeper question that haunted their minds. Had they made a grave mistake by sending out that SOS? The Nullex had followed the signal, and now the very species they had once thought insignificant was stepping into the fray with a fury the galaxy had never seen. But the Velari still didn't know the full truth. This wasn't just an accidental distress call. The Nullex had been drawn to this system, not by chance, but by design. Someone had lured them here, and that someone had been part of them. Velari's own secret experiments, a forgotten chapter in their history that they now regretted more than anything. As the battle continued to rage across the surface of the planet, if the Nullex were drawn to this place because of the Velari's mistakes, How far would the consequences go? The Velari were caught in a web of their own making, and they could only hope that the humans would not only defeat the swarm, but also uncover the truth that could destroy everything the Velari had worked for. The humans were here, but whether they would leave the Velari's world in one piece or expose their darkest secrets remained to be seen. The Velari watched in stunned silence as the first human drop pods shot through the atmosphere, blazing like streaks of fire across the sky. The Nullex dreadforms, massive, grotesque creatures of metal and living tissue, had barely begun their assault on the Velari cities when the pods descended. With an eerie precision, they hit the ground with an explosive force, sending shockwaves that reverberated through the air. The first wave of human soldiers emerged, not from the safety of ships or protected bunkers, but straight into the heart of the battlefield. They moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that left the Velari speechless. Clad in dark, reinforced exo-armor, each soldier seemed as though they had stepped out of the very depths of chaos itself, ready to face whatever horrors the Nullex could throw at them. The humans didn't wait for orders, didn't hesitate, they charged. The Nullex, taken by surprise, hesitated for just a moment. That was all the humans needed. Captain Rice, leading the assault, shouted commands into his helmet, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. His soldiers spread out, positioning themselves in tight tactical formations, working with an understanding of war that made the Velari's trained diplomats look like children. The Nullex advanced, but the humans were ready. They weren't just fighting, they were fighting to win. The Velari had watched entire armies crumble under the Nullex onslaught before, but these humans, they weren't afraid. Captain Reyes and his team cut through the Nullex lines with cold precision. The swarm, a force known for its ability to overwhelm and devour, seemed disoriented by the relentless barrage of human firepower. Each soldier, equipped with advanced weapons and tactics that even the Velari had not expected, fought with a ferocity that stunned the Velari commanders watching from orbit. It wasn't just the firepower that caught their attention, it was the adaptability of the humans. They didn't wait for reinforcements, didn't wait for the perfect moment. They made their own opportunities. A group of Nullex drones swarmed toward a Velari defensive position, intent on destroying it. But just as they were about to engage, a human soldier, a woman with short-cropped black hair, slipped out from behind cover. She hurled a series of explosives into their midst, and in an instant, the Nullex were scattered in every direction, their movements now erratic and confused. She didn't just fight with weapons, she fought with resourcefulness. Meanwhile, Reyes and his elite team made their way toward the heart of the Nullex assault. They had one mission: take out the Nullex Central Command Node, located deep in the heart of the city. As they pushed forward, more pods rained down around them. The humans seemed to be everywhere. Each drop pod that hit the surface added another wave to their already overwhelming numbers. The Nullex, too slow to adapt, began to panic. They had never encountered an enemy that moved so quickly, so decisively. The battle turned into a nightmare for the swarm. They couldn't keep up with the humans' relentless pace. The humans attacked, then vanished into the shadows, reappearing moments later in different locations, striking at vulnerable points. The Velari, still reeling from the shock of the humans' arrival, could only watch in awe as the battle unfolded before them. For the first time, they realized that the humans were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to dominate. It wasn't long before the Nullex began to retreat. It wasn't a full retreat, not yet, but the momentum was shifting in favor of the humans. The Velari, who had once believed themselves to be the most advanced race in the galaxy, now found themselves humbled. They had expected help from their allies, from species with more experience in dealing with the swarm. But they hadn't expected this. Humans, fighting with a primal intensity that no one in the galaxy could have anticipated. In the distance, a colossal Nullex dreadform emerged, its massive body crushing everything in its path as it advanced toward the battlefield. It was larger than any creature the humans had faced so far, its mere presence enough to send shockwaves through the atmosphere. But Captain Reyes didn't flinch. His voice was cold as he barked orders to his team, leading them straight toward the monster. "We don't run. We destroy." As the soldiers moved toward the dreadform, the Velari commanders exchanged worried glances. The swarm had sent their strongest weapon into the field, and yet the humans had no fear. They were human, and that meant something. The dreadform lumbered forward, its enormous limbs sweeping across the battlefield, smashing through buildings and swarming the human soldiers. But Reyes didn't hesitate. He had studied the creature, knew its weak points, and he was prepared to use them. A loud roar echoed across the battlefield as Reyes's team engaged the creature. Blasts of energy from human weapons pierced through its thick armor. The Nullex retaliated with fury, but the humans moved as one, attacking from all sides. Captain Reyes's voice rang out, steady and calm despite the chaos around him. Hit it from behind. The soldiers reacted in perfect synchronization, launching themselves onto the back of the massive beast. Using their exosuits, they climbed onto its body, dodging swipes from its massive claws. The Velari watched in disbelief as the humans maneuvered with an agility that defied the logic of combat. They weren't just attacking the dreadform, they were hunting it. Reyes's team struck its weak points, targeting areas where the creature's organic components were exposed. The Nullex, unable to fight back with the same coordinated tactics as the humans, faltered. And in that moment of weakness, the humans delivered the final blow. The dreadform collapsed, its massive body crumpling to the ground in a pile of twisted metal and broken limbs. The battlefield fell silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if on cue, the humans moved forward, taking up positions to continue their assault on the remaining Nullex forces. It was as though the battle had been nothing but a warm-up for them. For the Velari, it was a waking nightmare. They had watched entire fleets of their allies crumble under the weight of the Nullex swarm. But now, the humans had done what no one else had managed. They had turned the tide. The Velari realized, in that moment, just how powerful humanity was. They weren't here for diplomacy. They weren't here for negotiation. The humans had arrived to end the war, and the Nullex, for the first time in their existence, were facing an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. The Velari knew now that their future was no longer in their hands. They were no longer the masters of their own fate. It had been handed over to the Deathworlders, the humans. The tide of war had shifted, and it would never be the same again. The battle had barely begun to slow when Captain Reyes and his team received new orders. The Nullex were being pushed back, their swarm starting to fall apart under the relentless assault of human tactics. But something didn't sit right with Reyes. The Velari were more than just shocked at the sight of the humans' raw power. They were suspicious. And as the human forces secured the area, Reyes was given a mission that would take him deep into the heart of the Velari's secrets. There was an old underground installation on the far side of the planet, hidden beneath layers of dense rock. The Velari had denied its existence, claiming it had been abandoned for decades. But the moment Reyes received the order, he knew something was off. This was no ordinary mission. It was a warning. A dark chapter of the Velari's past was buried there, one that they hoped would remain forgotten. With his elite team, Reyes set off toward the facility. As they neared the entrance, they found that the entire area had been shielded from any external scans. It wasn't just the location that had been concealed. The Velari had gone to great lengths to hide everything about this place. The installation, built deep beneath the planet's surface, had been built to resist both physical and technological intrusion. Yet, Reyes knew that the Velari were hiding something, and they weren't the type to hide nothing. As the team descended through narrow, winding tunnels, Reyes' heart began to pound in his chest. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The facility was silent, unnaturally silent. No sounds of machinery, no signs of life. It was as if the place had been abandoned for centuries. Yet, everything inside the installation seemed, too, intact. It was as if time had stood still here. The walls were covered in old data pads, most of which had been wiped clean, but not thoroughly enough. As Reyes picked through them, he found faint traces of an experiment, long suppressed, that the Velari had been carrying out. The files spoke of a Nullex code, something that allowed the swarm to adapt to any attack, any strategy. But it wasn't just about understanding the Nullex, it was about controlling them. The Velari had tried to harness the power of the swarm. They had used this code to experiment with ways to enslave the Nullex, to create an army of their own. Reyes paused. He could feel the weight of the discovery crushing down on him. The Velari had not been victims of the swarm. They had been the instigators. It wasn't a mistake that the Nullex had come here. It was a design. The Velari had sent out the SOS not to call for help, but to activate a signal, one that would lead the Nullex straight to them. They had been bait. Reyes' mind raced. The Velari had not just been hiding this place, they had hidden their darkest secret. A secret that could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. If this got out, it would mean the end of the Velari's peaceful reputation, maybe even their entire alliance. And worse still, if the Nullex were following that beacon, there was more at stake than just the Velari's future. The swarm could spread through the galaxy, unstoppable. Reyes clenched his fist, seething with anger. These peaceful beings, the Velari, had played with something they didn't understand, something far more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. As his team continued to search the installation, they came across a central chamber, hidden deep beneath the surface. It was vast, filled with dormant machinery, and in the center was a large, transparent tank filled with an alien substance. Inside the tank, there was something moving, a creature, not quite alive, yet not entirely dead. Reyes stepped forward, cautiously, his breath caught in his throat. The creature was a Nullex, but it was different from the others they had encountered. This one was alive, or at least partially. Its eyes, if they could be called that, shifted toward Reyes as though sensing his presence. He could see now that this was more than just a Nullex. It was something else. The Velari had not only been trying to control the swarm, they had been breeding it. The Nullex here had been altered, reshaped into something far more dangerous than what the galaxy had known. Reyes turned to one of his officers, his voice a low growl. "This is bigger than we thought." They weren't just studying the Nullex. They were making them stronger. The officer nodded grimly, his face pale. "And they've been trying to perfect it for years." Reyes clenched his jaw, feeling the anger build inside him. They didn't call for help. They called to bring the swarm here. They lured it in. And we walked right into their trap. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The Velari, who had called for humanity's aid, were not the innocent victims they seemed to be. They had created the very threat that now ravaged their world. Captain Reyes had known that humanity's involvement would change the galaxy. But he hadn't known the depth of the betrayal that the Velari had set into motion. If the truth came out, it would destroy them, and it would cast humanity in a new light. The galaxy would see them not as saviors, but as the tool of destruction sent to expose the truth. As Reyes continued to search the chamber, his eyes landed on a datapad resting on a nearby console. His fingers hovered over the device, and with a sharp movement, he activated it. The data revealed everything. The Velari had not only created the Nullex, but they had also been experimenting with a weaponized virus, one that would have turned the Nullex into mindless drones, completely under their control. But something had gone wrong. The virus mutated, spreading in ways that the Velari had never predicted. It wiped out entire research teams. The swarm had become an uncontrollable force, and in desperation, the Velari had locked it all away. But now, with the swarm on the attack, the humans had arrived just in time to expose the entire truth. The Velari had hoped to keep their dark secret buried, but now humanity had found it. Reyes felt his mind begin to unravel as the weight of the truth hit him. The Velari had gambled with forces they didn't understand. And now, it was up to humanity to clean up the mess. It was clear there would be no more alliances, no more peaceful resolutions. The swarm needed to be stopped. But now, Reyes and his team had another mission. They would not only have to destroy the Nullex, they would have to expose the Velari for what they truly were. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Reyes stood at the edge of the battlefield, his eyes scanning the wreckage left in the wake of the Nullex retreat. The humans had pushed the swarm back with brutal precision. Every step forward, every Nullex dreadform that fell, revealed a deeper, more unsettling truth. The Velari were not innocent victims. They had been the architects of this nightmare. And now, as Reyes stood surrounded by his team, he felt the weight of their responsibility grow heavier. It wasn't just about saving the Velari anymore. The galaxy was about to learn the truth, and that truth would reshape everything. The Velari had created the Nullex, unleashed them upon the galaxy, and now they had sent out a distress call to humanity to clean up their mess. Humanity had responded, but at a cost. The Velari were not just a peaceful race, they were manipulators, creators of chaos. As Reyes and his squad moved deeper into the heart of the Velari's military complex, the full scope of the danger became clearer. The Nullex were not merely a swarm of mindless machines. They were tools of war designed by the Velari to be wielded at their command. But those tools had become a weapon beyond their control, and now they were attacking their creators. Reyes clenched his fists as the mission shifted. It wasn't just about defeating the swarm, it was about exposing the Velari and their dangerous game. The human fleet was still in orbit, holding the line against any new Nullex forces that might arrive, but they were growing increasingly restless. The truth had to come out. But how could humanity expose the Velari without throwing the galaxy into chaos? The humans, after all, were known as Deathworlders, and that reputation was earned for a reason. Their world had been a constant struggle for survival, where every corner of their existence had been shaped by war, violence, and the relentless demands of a dangerous environment. It was their resilience, their unrelenting will to survive, that had made them what they were today. And it was that same survival instinct that now made them a force to be reckoned with. The Velari had long believed that their peaceful ways were the only path to prosperity, that harmony could be built through diplomacy and cooperation. But humanity had proven something different, something far darker and more powerful. Humans didn't rely on treaties or fragile peace. They relied on their own strength, their will to survive no matter the odds. And now, the Velari would have to face that strength. As Reyes and his team moved closer to the central control room of the Velari facility, the air around them seemed to grow thicker. The walls were lined with complex machinery, some of it still running, others frozen in time. The deeper they went, the more unsettling it became. This was the heart of the Velari's dangerous secret, a place where they had not only created the Nullex, but where they had laid the groundwork for something even worse. As they reached the control room, Reyes motioned for his team to be silent. There, behind a reinforced glass panel, stood a massive terminal, its purpose unclear, but its importance obvious. Reyes approached it slowly, his mind racing. He had a feeling that this terminal held the answers to everything, answers that would reveal the true scale of the Velari's involvement in the swarm's creation. As Reyes activated the terminal, a holographic interface sprang to life in front of him, displaying hundreds of complex data streams. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for: files, archives, experiments. The Velari had created the Nullex, not just as a force of destruction, but as an extension of their own desires for power. They had experimented with mind control, with creating perfect warriors beings that would be entirely under their command. The Velari had believed that they could wield such a force, that they could bend the Nullex to their will. But as Reyes read through the data, it became clear they had failed. The Nullex had turned on their creators, evolving beyond their original design, becoming a relentless force of destruction. And now, the galaxy was paying the price. This is what they were hiding, Reyes muttered to himself, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. The Velari had tried to create something uncontrollable, and now it was loose in the galaxy. The Nullex were no longer just anything less than a full-scale galactic response, and that response was coming. In the heart of the human fleet, there was a feeling of urgency now. As the battle ended and the Nullex were pushed back, the higher command began making their own plans. The data the team had retrieved was already being analyzed, and military strategists were working around the clock to find a solution. But Reyes knew better. The Nullex were adapting, evolving in ways the galaxy had never anticipated. The strategy that had worked once would not work again. The swarm would return, and next time, they would be ready. The idea of containing the Nullex seemed impossible. It wasn't just about destroying the swarm, it was about understanding it. And that understanding was slipping through humanity's fingers faster than they could keep up. Reyes and his team were sent to the front line again, this time to a different planet where the Nullex had made their presence known. The team was smaller now, their spirits heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. They knew they had no choice but to fight. But even as they prepared for the next assault, Rise couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a war they would never win. They were Death Worlders, trained to survive the impossible, but even their best might not be enough. As they descended onto the planet, Rise received a transmission from Command. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Captain, we've found something. We've located the Nullex's core." Reyes blinked. "What does that mean? A central command?" "Not exactly. It's something much worse. A conduit. We believe it's the source of the Nullex's intelligence. If we can destroy it, we might be able to sever the connection between the swarm and their evolutionary drive. But it's buried deep under the surface, and it's surrounded by swarm forces." Reyes paused, the weight of the mission sinking in. "If we destroy it, we can end the Nullex threat?" The voice was firm. "It's our best shot." The team moved quickly, following the coordinates. They fought their way through the planet's surface, pushing forward against waves of Nullex forces, but every victory felt temporary. The swarm was unyielding, as though the creatures knew exactly how to counter every move they made. It was a fight not just for survival, but for time to reach the conduit, time to destroy the source of the Nullex power. As they neared the location, the landscape began to change. The planet's surface was cracking open, the Earth itself seeming to tear apart as the Nullex pushed forward. The conduit's location was deep beneath the crust, and as they dug deeper, Rise began to notice something unsettling. The Nullex weren't just attacking, they were waiting for them to come closer. It was as if the swarm had anticipated their every move, adapted to every strategy the humans had used. Finally, they reached the heart of the Nullex hive. It was not what Reyes had expected. There were no giant structures, no towering walls. Instead, it was a vast, pulsating chamber, alive with strange, glowing tendrils that stretched out in every direction. In the center of the chamber, a massive, crystalline structure hummed with power. The conduit. It was the brain of the swarm, the source of its intelligence. As Reyes prepared to plant the explosive charges, the Nullex descended upon them with a terrifying force. They came in waves, their movements synchronized and unnervingly precise. Each wave of attackers seemed more aware, more strategic, as if they were learning from each battle. Reyes and his team fought with everything they had, but they were only human. Even the most skilled soldiers were beginning to feel the weight of the war. As they planted the last of the charges and prepared to retreat, Rise glanced back at the conduit. It was pulsing now, brighter than ever, and he knew the truth. Even if they destroyed it, the Nullex would not die. They would adapt. The explosion rocked the planet, sending shockwaves through the ground. The Nullex forces, though, didn't collapse. They regrouped, adapted, and reformed into something new. The battle was far from over. As Reyes and his team made their way back to the ship, his mind raced. Humanity had won a battle, but the war had only just begun. The Nullex were not just a threat to the Velari, they were a threat to everyone. And now, the humans were more than just soldiers. They were the galaxy's last hope, standing against a force that could learn and evolve faster than they could fight it. But even with all their strength, all their resilience, Reyes knew that the cost of this war would be greater than anything they had ever imagined. They'd stepped into the unknown, and now there would be no going back.